everybody to Conscious Voices Rising. My name is Deepika Delmenico and I'm the founder of Conscious Woman Rising. And when we planned the theme for the 2020 global gathering, we really couldn't have imagined what would unfold in the world this year. Bushfires across Australia of the likes we've never experienced before, the pandemic, the upheaval and discord in the social realm that we're experiencing. So the very theme of Conscious Voices Rising and the path forward just seems so pertinent for conversation at this moment in time. And today it is really wonderful to be in conversation with a pioneer of integrative and holistic medicine, the widely renowned Dr. Marc Cohen. Professor Marc Cohen, also known as Dr. Marc, is a pioneer of wellness and integrative medicine. He's a registered medical practitioner with degrees in Western medicine, physiology, psychological medicine, and PhDs in both Chinese medicine and biomedical engineering. Marc is a founding board member of the Global Wellness Summit, co-founder of the Bathe the World Foundation, and founder of Extreme Wellness Institute, and co-owner of, now I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Maruia hot springs in the South Island of New Zealand, which just, my imagination just transports me there instantly. As a pioneer of integrative and holistic medicine, Dr. Marc has published over 100 peer-reviewed scientific papers and multiple books on wellness topics, and as well as made significant impacts on education, research, clinical practice and policy. In 2002, he became Australia's first Professor of Complementary Medicine and Head of the Department of Complementary Medicine at RMIT University, where he oversaw the teaching of Chinese medicine, osteopathy, and chiropractic, and developed an online Master of Wellness program. So, today we are in conversation with an incredible depth and wealth of wisdom in all things related to health, and from a fully assimilated, alive, living, integrated experience of what that means. So, welcome, Dr. Marc.
Oh, thank you, Deepika. Great to be with you.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful to be in conversation with you. I, many years ago when I studied naturopathy, you were actually one of my lecturers in medical diagnosis. And I can remember at that time thinking, this is really wonderful, because I had not been in the company of a medical practitioner before that viewed the body through such a holistic lens. And that really resonated with me as being having the potential for authentic healing pathways for people.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I pioneered education of doctors and naturopaths and chiropractors, osteopaths, Chinese medicine practitioners. And I remember getting in trouble in a lot of times. So I was teaching medical students in the 1990s, complementary medicine. I set up a centre for complementary medicine at Monash Medical School. And we had one program where we sent out the medical students to naturopathic practices to learn what a naturopath did. And to actually get a consultation and just to see, what a naturopath did, so that they'd have an understanding. And I remember getting called up by the dean saying, "Why have we got naturopaths on our payroll? We can't be paying naturopaths," because, I had paid the naturopaths to take the students, and
yes,
trouble for that. And then, I got over that by saying, if the public are using naturopaths, the doctors need to know what they do. And then I remember when I was teaching naturopaths, and I set up a program with a good friend of mine who was running, he's an emergency physician, and we sent naturopaths into the emergency department at some of Melbourne's hospitals, top Melbourne hospitals, so the naturopaths would understand about acute medicine and what happens in an emergency department, because otherwise they don't get exposed to that. So, I love breaking down the barriers and the bridges between disciplines, and I always think that the really interesting stuff happens on the edge, and I've always seen myself as the bridge. So I bridge complementary medicine, alternative medicine, and conventional medicine, and science and spirituality, or even now, academia and commercial enterprise. So, I really love bridging different disciplines, Western Eastern medicine, Western Eastern cosmology. And that's where I find my joy in the integration of that, and trying to create a holistic perspective that then has a really big impact. And, I've been anticipating this sort of huge disruption for my whole life, pretty much, thinking, Western civilization has to totally disrupt in my lifetime. And, I'm seeing it happening now. And so I've sort of been preparing for this for the last 50 years. And yeah.
Fantastic. And I love that the way you describe yourself as a bridge. And it really is, you're taking all the fragmented parts that are so important. But as long as they remain fragmented, we will never collectively create the whole as we're intended to live as an experience.
And we're in a situation now, how do we create a whole planet where everyone, the whole planet can live and experience, being well? And that's the challenge. We've had all these different governance models, different medical models, different policies. And now that we're one world, and, travel, things can spread around the world really quickly, and information can spread around the world instantly. How do we create a world that's well? And this is the challenge of our times. And this is what we're going, for the first time ever, humanity has to reach a stable population. We have to be in harmony with the earth. We have to be in form of homeostatic balance with the rest of nature. And it hasn't happened yet, but we're seeing it happen right now. And what we do, if you're alive on the planet right now, you're contributing to this incredible evolution of consciousness. And there's different ways we could go. So, every body, every person, every conscious being has an influence on the direction that we head from here. And that's why it's been great to, get on webinars and share ideas and, try and uplift consciousness and make people realize that, there's a path of fear and there's a path of love. And how do we, love's actually scary. Fear is secure, whereas love is scary. But how do we embrace the path of love? And
I love that you're touching on this. Love that you're touching on this, because this is where it's all at. You're right. Fear is secure. Love is terrifying.
But it's opening. Love is transformative. And I see, I love to go back to basics, the absolute fundamentals. And, in Western science, the fundamentals are the laws of thermodynamics. And they even seem to be more fundamental than quantum theory, because they're the arrow of time. And the first law says that matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed, just transform from one to the other. And that essentially, in spiritual sort of science, says that all is one. The universe is one thing. You can't add to it. You can't subtract from it. So it's everything is one. And that's widely accepted. But then the second law says that in an isolated system, entropy increases. So you get disorder increasing in an isolated system, which means once you separate yourself from the rest of the universe, you'll have pain, you'll have disorder. And that's, if you separate yourself psychologically, you say, I'm separate from the world, and the world's out there, I'm in here, that's already creating a closed system, and you're going to become disordered. So to have life, to have evolution, to learn, you have to be an open system. And there's this tension, there's polarity in all life, but the polarity with evolution is either being open and to be able to evolve, or being closed and devolve. And, being closed is the path of fear, and being open is the path of love. So we have the forces of evolution, which are trying to integrate and assimilate and increase diversity, increase complexity, increase the range and scope and the richness of life. And you have entropy, which tries to control and block off and isolate and restrict life. And those forces are, fully in play right now. And, we're all part of that process. And they're all in play both in us biologically, but also in our social structures and our governance. And the interface, or the balance between those two forces, determines where we actually sit in our world. So, and we each have to balance that for ourselves, but also how do we balance it for the whole planet? That's the challenge.
Absolutely. But it just seems basic, but so fundamentally vital that we start by observing nature. Where did we deviate from living in understanding and adherence to the laws of nature and the very elements of which we're composed in the first place?
Well, we are composed of nature, and I think that understanding still hasn't sunk in. I mean, there's a lot of talk. We're just learning about the microbiome in our guts, on our skin, in our environments. But that we are nature, and to learn about nature. And one of the things that I'm still doing active research. I've sort of left my university job. I've still got PhD students, but I'm doing my own independent research now at different universities on water and on the microbiome, and also on not just the microbiome, but on fermentation, looking at bacteria and yeast colonies, that how they can work together to create really potent medicinal products for us. But the fact that we are made of water, and water doesn't stay sterile, and there are literally trillions of bacteria and yeast and archaea that make up our bodies, that are in our bodies, on our skin, in our environments, that are hugely important for our health. And even when we go into nature and do forest bathing, just by sitting in nature, we exchange genetic material with the soil and with the trees and with the fungi. And this understanding is ancient, but it's also becoming very modern. Now we have next generation sequencing, so we can look at a SCOBY, a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast, and do a full next generation sequencing on it to understand every species of yeast and bacteria that's in that, and understand how they metabolize together. So we're taking this ancient wisdom and adding sort of advanced scientific techniques to actually increase our understanding of ourselves. And this is literally a great awakening of who we are. And I love the theme for your conference, conscious voices rising, because this is what we need.
Absolutely.
And it's not just our voices. I think we speak for our bacteria, we speak for water, and water is conscious. So
totally conscious. And what's feeling so alive in me listening to you speak is we are sterilizing the very life out of ourselves and the planet.
Well, there is a war
on life. To life itself.
Well, that's it. There is this war on life. And I documented it recently, where I was looking at just the products that we buy, and, on a society level. And it's about 2/3 of the global domestic product of the world. So 2/3 of all the money in the world is spent on products that are anti-life. And so since the start of the last century, we started putting chlorine in our drinking water. And this bizarre sort of situation where we're going to put poison in the water to make it healthy. And this is sort of the approach that we've taken. And sure, you don't want public health outbreaks of typhoid and cholera and those sort of things, but you don't want to be drinking and bathing in chlorine, because the gut bacteria and the skin bacteria in your body are essential for your health. And chlorine is a war chemical, yet we're bathing in it and we're drinking in it. So we're actually waging war on the bacteria in and on our bodies. And the reason why they use chlorine in water is it's so toxic that it'll kill bacteria at the point of use. 0.2 to 0.6 parts per million is actively antibacterial when you use it. So that's affecting your skin and your gut, and that affects everything.
Everything. Because people can associate with being in battle with emotions, or being in battle with the mind, but people generally don't associate with being in battle or being at war with the physicality through what we're ingesting.
Well, we've done that. So we start with chlorine, then we start with fertilizers and pesticides, which are literally anti-life, and antibiotics and disinfectants, and so we've had this waging this war on life, and germs like they're the enemy, whereas they're our best friends. Most bacteria and viruses are actually they're there to help us battle pathogens. And they help to when the bacteria and the microbiome of your nasal passages detect a new virus, they'll grab that and they'll present it to an antigen presenting cell, so you can actually detect it and build up antibodies to it. So they're there to help us. So it doesn't make sense to me that we're waging war on them. But then the war mentality is about control and entropy, and let's isolate it, block it, control it. And that is an approach it's worked for control. But what it does is it sort of condenses that control in the hands of a very few people, and it takes the control out of everybody else. So I think we're in this process where we have to take back control and sovereignty over our own health, over our own life, from the powers that shouldn't be, that determine how toxic our environment is, and we've had this industrialization process where we've toxified our water, our air, our food, our soil, our bodies, and we have this massive task now to undo that. And how do we regenerate? How do we? And it's amazing because nature naturally regenerates. Nature is incredibly generative. But to move from big agriculture with pesticides and fertilizers and destroying the soil to regenerative agriculture, and there are systems that can do that can regenerate soil in a few years more than nature could do in hundreds of years. But that technology is still nascent. We have to try and promote that. And there are so many generative, holistic, healing technologies that are out there that just haven't had the attention or the reach because of the control systems that are in place that actually, it's not in their interest to have that. So we all have to do that in our own personal interest. So, the conscious rising has to happen in each of us as individuals. And the way to do that is to focus on the path of love and do what, if you, once you're at peace with yourself, when you've sort of gone away from fear and love, and you just found peace in yourself, and you're really comfortable and grounded in yourself, then you know what to do. You can just know what the right thing is, and doing the right thing becomes natural. You don't have to question or ask or find another authority. We all know what the right thing to do is when we're in touch with ourselves. And that goes for what should we eat, or what medicines will work for us, or what should we do in our society, what should we do for other people. Inherently, this knowledge is within us, but we have to be able to tap into that. And I've been working on programs now. I've just released an online course. I'm running retreats at Maria Hot Springs in New Zealand and other places, where I encourage people to go to the extremes of their physiology in terms of, their water. We dehydrate people, then we give them amazing water, then we feast them and fast them, and we get them to pant and then hold their breath and do hot and cold bathing. But then we do activities that are flow activities where you're totally engaged in the moment. But then one of the most powerful things is to actively do nothing. Like to try, and you may think that's sort of, oh yeah, I do nothing all weekend. But there's always less you can do. You may think you're doing nothing, there's always less you can do. And when you can do as little as possible, you find the still point within you. From the greatest movement comes the the greatest movement comes from the stillest point. Mm-hmm. So when you find that still point within you, and that's the deep peace that's within you, then from that point, that's a platform for all the other actions you can take, and they become effortless and conscious. So that's, it's a great practice just to find stillness and do nothing.
Absolutely. And so tell me a little more, if you can explain a little more about the extremes of the hot and the cold, and the dehydration to hydration with really pure water, and feast, famine. How does that tie in with taking one to being in the still point?
So there's all these stresses that happen to us that are out of our control, and emotional, physical, injury, illness. And the best way that we can prepare our bodies to cope with those stresses is to consciously stress our body that's within our control. And it's not just physiological and psychological stress. You're looking at how do we stress not just our bodies, but our organs, but not just our organs, but our cells, not just our cells, but our mitochondria. And the language of our mitochondria, of our individual cells, are the 5 elements of life, which is water, glucose, oxygen, temperature, and carbon dioxide. So they're the 5 elements of the the equation of photosynthesis or respiration. So every cell in your body, they're the 5 elements that they talk. That's the language of your cells. And we can not normally be under voluntary control of our hydration level. I mean, you can't control how much your kidneys are going to excrete. You can't control your blood sugar level, just by thinking about it. These are under the autonomic control, but we can consciously control our external environment and manipulate those things. So we can, dehydrate ourselves, go into a sauna, get really hot, get really thirsty, and then hydrate. We can, do intermittent fasting. So we all fast overnight, but then wait till we're really hungry to eat, and then the feast is in the first bite. So we can go to the limits there. We can pant until we're hyperventilated and we've expelled carbon dioxide and we're quite alkaline, because the lungs control short-term pH control. So when we hyperventilate, we become alkaline, and it's a bit dysphoric. You get a bit dizzy and go to the extremes of alkalinity and hypocapnia, and then we can hold our breath and go to the extremes of hypoxia. So we can manipulate our blood chemistry just by controlling our breath. And then we can do the same with hot and cold. We can go into a sauna until we're extremely hot, and then we can go into an ice bath until we're feeling cold. And these are therapies that have a lot of historical evidence, epidemiological evidence, clinical trial evidence that actually support our immune system. That they're not things that, as a doctor, I can prescribe to a certain amount of heat or cold. But what is required is for you to determine what is your limit in that moment. So and in any of these techniques, you get to a point where your body demands your attention. So when you're in the sauna long enough, you eventually get so hot that your body starts saying, hey, we're getting a bit hot here, you should get out. And then your body actually demands your attention, because your cells and your mitochondria are screaming at you, saying, hey, we're here, don't be distracted, And it's the same when you go to doing a yoga stretch. You get to the edge of your stretch, and there's a point where it's comfortably uncomfortable. But if you just breathe and be there, you can tolerate it. You can go to that edge. But if you push yourself further, you're going to hurt yourself. Well, you can do the same with your physiology. When you're as hot as you can be, you get to the point of what I call forced mindfulness. And that's the point where your body has forced your mind to come to the party. So your mind and your body and your mitochondria are all on the same page. And if you just breathe and focus, you can tolerate that for a while. Maybe 3 breaths, maybe 2 breaths. After you've done it for a while, you can do it for 100 breaths. But you can get to this point of forced mindfulness, and that's the dose that you need in that moment. And once you've achieved that forced mindfulness, when your mind, body, and breath are all in alignment, then you can go and cool down, and then you can do the same in the cold water. Get to the point where you're forced mindfulness there. So that getting to that point of forced mindfulness exercises your coping strategies and your physiological biochemical coping strategies. It also forces your cells to declutter themselves, because there's an analogy where if you're at home on the couch, you've got a whole Netflix series you want to watch, you've got people coming over bringing you food all the time. That's your comfort zone. You're super comfortable. You don't even have to go to your kitchen to cook. And you can spend a long time like that. And that's, our cells are like that most of the time. There's heaps of glucose, there's heaps of oxygen. They're getting their waste taken away, the food's coming, they don't have to do anything. But then, suddenly if people stop bringing you food, well, actually, when you're super comfortable like that, what happens to your fridge and your veggie drawer and your fruit basket? The fruit starts to go a bit moldy. In the veggie drawer, the veggies go limp, and the jars in the back of your fridge start to go out of their use-by date. Well, that also happens to your cells. When they're so comfortable getting fed all the time, their proteins get misfolded past the use-by date, and they don't care about it because they don't need it. But then suddenly food stops coming in. Well, then, you start going to your fridge, and you see the rank food, you throw that out and compost it, and then the food you can eat, you eat, and so you'll start to sort things out. Well, the same things happen to your cells when you stress them, when you deprive them. They start doing autophagy. So they get these misfolded proteins that weren't functional, and they break them down and they make new proteins that are functional. and apoptosis happens. So the cells that are aging and precancerous and aberrant, they actually get programmed cell death, and you regenerate new cells. And just like your house, when your house is decluttered and you know where everything is, it becomes so easy. Just you got a job to do. Oh, I know where the tools are. Just you do it, then you put them away, and it's easy to maintain that. Um, and your cells do the same thing. When your cells are decluttered, they become more efficient producing energy. So suddenly you're actually eating less, but getting more energy from the food that you're eating, you're metabolizing. Um, and this actually then just uplifts everything else you do, because if you can get, you're eating less, you actually got cravings for, your microbiome starts to change, so you actually crave better food, or you stop craving high sugar, fat, and salt. But you can extract more energy from the food that you're getting. Suddenly you've got more energy and more clarity and more mental clarity. And then just your whole life can uplift. So this is something you can just do every day. And a lot of these, all the techniques that I'm teaching at the moment can be done pretty much for free at home with no special equipment or even special expertise or training. They're just things that you can do just within your own life. And some of them, they're a little bit of equipment. So upgrading the water quality in your home is one of the most basic things you can do. So, you need a water filter, but that it's not an ongoing expense. Changing how you eat, just extending the fast overnight and waiting until you're actively hungry and visualizing food and waiting until your digestive system is really prepared for that next meal. Again, that will mean that when you eat, and my mother used to say, hunger is the best chef. So, when you're really hungry, that's when food tastes the best. But that's when all your digestive enzymes are there prepared to break down that food and metabolize it and store it away. So that you're actually going to get more energy and nutrients from that food. And also digestion takes quite a bit of energy. So if you keep on eating all the time, all throughout the day, there's a lot of your energy involved with just digestion. And you've got to push that food along for the next food to come in. So you're not fully digesting. So once you extend your fast, when you eat, you're going to fully digest what's there. You're using less energy to digest, and you're going to get more energy from the food. So on so many levels, you've improved your whole metabolism. And this is such an easy thing to do. So yeah, just eating higher quality, less quantity, and altering the time where you eat can actually to really transform your relationship with food and your metabolism.
And your relationship to life.
Well, that's right. And you can do the same with breathing, and you can do the same with just activity by, bringing more consciousness to what you're doing.
Yeah, and I love the way you describe the tension point, bringing yourself to that tension point where there's that real potential for something new to evolve, something new to be created. And as you're describing, it's again this it's fear.
Well, fear's
Fear
got
is kind of almost a comfortable state to stay in, to not push ourselves to limits, to tension points from which something loving can evolve.
Well, that's it. Fear's not a bad thing. Fear's going to stop us injuring ourselves. I talk about that tension point as the point where stress meets bliss. That pleasure and pain line. So it's comfortably uncomfortable. And your ability to comfortably tolerate discomfort changes with what you do. And a really easy way to practice being comfortably uncomfortable is just to have a cold shower. You start with a hot shower, because cold showers aren't that comfortable, especially in winter now. I think the temperature in the taps now is about 10 or 12 degrees. That's pretty cold. But a cold shower can actually be, there's ways to have a cold shower to make it really comfortable or much less uncomfortable, and you can tolerate that. And once you can tolerate that, well then you can tolerate other uncomfortable things in your life. So that difficult conversation that you have to have, or that messy job you didn't want to do and were putting off, suddenly you've trained yourself to actually do those things.
So these extremes are really, they're so empowering. They're so empowering and embodying in terms of wellness. One cannot help but be well when we don't shy away from this threshold
But what
between
you also
comfort
find
and
is that the extremes change. So by visiting the edge of your comfort zone and not pushing it, so you're not going to the yoga stretch and then trying to stretch further and do more splits or whatever. Just visiting the edge of how wide can I get my legs? How much of the splits? How far can I reach down and touch my toes? To visiting that edge, it naturally expands on its own. So if you try and touch your toes every day and not push it, but just go to the limit, you'll find after a couple of days you're going further. And after a couple of weeks, you're going even further. And you haven't had to push it, it just naturally expands. This is our physiological range, our homeostatic range, the flexibility of response that we can have to life. And by understanding how our range can be explored, or understanding our limits of the edge, it also helps us to find the still point in the middle. Because somewhere between hot and cold is perfect temperature. Somewhere between panting and holding your breath is the perfect breath rate. And by going to the edges, we can naturally then fall back into that bliss point, that still point that I talked about in the middle. And that visiting that still point is one thing, it's blissful, but it's also regenerative, restorative, and it really puts us in touch with ourselves. Because what is in that still point in the middle? Well, that's us. That's who we are. And the other thing is just what we do and how we handle things. So exploring that essence of who we are in that still point in the middle then gives us the ability to then go and visit the edge of our comfort zone and naturally expand it. And when we consciously expand our comfort zone, it means that we've also expanded our ability to cope with stress that's out of our control. And there's always, whether it's all this social disruption or financial or emotional or injury or disease, these things can be out of our control. But if we're alive and vibrant and we're been expanding our capacity to cope, then we can cope better with all of life.
It's pretty extraordinary what you're doing, and you've taken what could have remained very comfortably without going to the tension point in terms of all your research and understanding, but really committed yourself to bringing it into the capacity for people to have a life experience of it.
Well, I actually did that in my life. I was actually trapped, but like so many people, I was trapped by comfort. I was, for 16 years, I was a tenured professor. Which means I was on the top of the academic pay scale, and I had a job for the rest of my life, and I loved my job. I set up a Masters of Wellness program, and I was teaching natural medicine, and I was doing amazing research with really amazing PhD students and research projects. So I loved that. It was super comfortable. But then after 16 years, at the start of last year, the university discontinued the Masters of Wellness program. And then I was, my role would have been just to teach integrative medicine to osteo-chiro Chinese medical students and do the research. And that didn't seem so innovative or expansive to me. And I made this big decision to quit my job. And I kept my PhD students. So I've still got 6 incredible PhD students and I'm still working with them. But I'm no longer getting paid. So I really put myself out of my comfort zone and said, okay, I'm challenged now to then go out and work, do more in the world. So I'm doing more commercially and philanthropically and just in terms of the research world. So for many years, I was the university researcher, and companies would come to me and do their, clinical trials or, explore research they wanted to do. Now I'm partnering with companies and I'm going to universities and saying, hey, I want to do this research. Can you do it? So I'm now doing it from the commercial world, doing research at University of Sydney and RMIT University, where I was a professor, and others with my own research projects. And we're doing research into water and looking at metagenomics of bacteria and yeast in fermented products, etc. And it's super exciting for me, but it is a challenge. And I broke out of my own comfort zone, so I'm still a bit exploring what am I going to do when I grow up. Still working that out. But I see a role to play globally, and actually right now I've been doing a lot of work and new research and putting it together, or at least for me, to create policy documents for hot springs and spas and resorts and saunas to discuss and to show how these places are actually really healthy. And we've got the situation right now where most of the hot springs and certainly most of the public saunas in the world are closed.
Closed.
And that's because it's just the policymakers do not understand the health benefits. And saunas are probably the healthiest place you can be, because once it's over 55 degrees, a virus will just melt. It's like butter or coconut oil will just melt, once it hits a temperature. So there's no way a coronavirus or other viruses, will survive in a sauna. And the Scandinavian countries that are hit by flu season every year in the winter, in Scandinavia, Russia, Japan, they all do hot and cold. And sauna's been used not just for viral infections and flu season, but for a whole range of diseases for hundreds of generations. And there's evolutionary evidence. So for the last 600 million years, every insect, fish, bird, reptile uses heat to control pathogens. And all mammals have the ability to raise our temperature with fever to control pathogens. So heat is one of the major ways we sterilize things. So heat has always been used to control pathogens. Yet, the first thing you do when you get a viral infection, your body raises your temperature. So people measuring temperature, because heat is one of our large defenses against any pathogen. Yet we can outsource the generation of heat to the environment, and just like animals do, because fish and reptiles and birds don't generate a fever, they go into the sun and raise their temperature artificially. Well, we can do the same. And ever since humans were humans, they've used hot springs and sweat lodges and places to go to heat themselves up. And this is part of all cultures. It's part of all forms of medicine. Yet at the moment, we're being denied this use of heat. And if you think about generating a fever, it takes quite a lot of metabolic energy. It's energy. That's why it's exhausting getting sick, because generating that fever and trying to combat an infection takes a lot of energy. But you can outsource that energy to a hot bath. You can outsource that energy to your water heater, or to a sauna, or to a hot shower even, and get your body. And you can. In a hot bath, when you get to that point of comfortably uncomfortable with heat, it means you've raised your body temperature between 1 and 2 degrees. So you can actually artificially raise your body temperature. And when you do that, your immune system is heightened. The membranes on your immune cells become more liquid and fluid. They can better accept antigens. They can migrate to the site of an infection quicker and easier. So your whole innate immune system is enhanced when you raise your body temperature. And that's what fever does. The other important thing is when you raise your temperature artificially, then you cool yourself down. So not only are you activating your immune system and your inflammatory processes with the heat, you're also exercising the dampening down of the inflammatory processes. So, and that's super important, because a lot of the problems with infection is this cytokine storm, that inflammation goes out of control. And it's not the infective agent that does the damage, it's our body's response to it. So when you're artificially putting yourself in a heated situation, then when you cool down, you're getting all the dampening effects on inflammation being activated. And this happens at a biochemical level with heat shock proteins, and there's a whole lot of biochemical metabolic machinery designed to cope with heat stress. And as you go up the evolutionary scale, our ability to cope with heat stress increases. So as a mammal and as a human, we have far more ability to cope with heat stress than a virus or a bacteria. So you can tolerate a temperature that a virus just cannot. A virus will be destroyed. A virus doesn't have heat shock proteins to protect it and repair any damage. It doesn't have ways to dissipate heat that we do. It doesn't have behavioral mechanisms. So we can cope with much higher temperatures than a virus can.
And it's wonderful because you're just, for everybody listening, it's remembering just this sophisticated, innate intelligence that we possess, and to just have a bit of faith in our body that it really does know how to adapt, how to remain fluid and malleable,
Mm.
and to meet life in a conscious way. But I love that you've described, given really great, succinct tools already to work with the quality of our water.
Mm.
You
Well,
know,
I'm so
if
passionate about water. That's my big thing. So after leaving the university sector, which, as I say, I'm still doing research, um, I've been challenged the last 10, 15 years. I've been talking a lot about, you might have heard me talk at conferences about detoxification and the toxic truths and how the world is so toxic. And one of the things, the best, most important, vital things you can do to reduce toxicity is improve your water. And people would come to me after my lecture and say, okay, so which water filter should I get? And I'd say, well, it's complicated. And they'd say, well, if you can't work it out, you've got a medical degree and 2 PhDs. How can we work it out? And, I really looked at, which water filter could I recommend to people? And there wasn't one that really I could embrace. And for me, looking at water, it wasn't just about the particular filtration processes. It was made it really important. And when you look at the research, to filter not just your drinking water, but your bathing water. Because, and there's really solid research on this, where when you look at, chlorine is one of the most potent toxic substances in our water. But when you drink chlorinated water, and you might drink, 1 or 2 liters of water a day, that chlorine passes through the liver before it gets distributed in the body. So you don't get chloroform and trihalomethanes and other disinfection byproducts in your blood when you drink chlorinated water. It's not good for your liver gets punished, but it doesn't appear in your blood. But if you bathe in chlorinated water, and when you bathe, generally it's over 25 degrees, maybe 35, 40 degrees. All these chlorine is volatile, but so is chloroform and trihalomethanes and disinfection byproducts. They're volatile, and you breathe them in through your lungs. And your lungs have a massive surface area, and when these substances go through your lungs, they go straight into your blood without bypassing your liver, which means 5 minutes after a hot shower or a hot bath, you can actually detect chloroform, trihalomethanes, disinfection byproducts in your blood. And they've done the studies to show that. And the same with dermal absorption. It goes straight through your skin. There was one study, I think it was 1996, it was a long time ago when this study was done, where they actually looked at drinking, just dermal absorption, and they had people on a mask with a hot shower, and then just through inhalation. And they showed through inhalation and dermal absorption, you get more of a chlorine load than you do by drinking it, and that goes straight into your blood. So for me, any filter had to have the whole house filter to filter your bathing water, not just your drinking water.
Yeah. And our home, we live rurally, and so we have rainwater, and we've had a grander system since we lived here. So whenever people come to our home, I say you can drink out of any tap, and whatever you bathe in, it's enlivened. So
that's not a filter, that's a structuring device. I want to talk about structuring is actually, so it's not just about filtering, it's structuring the water.
Yeah, so we only have a structuring device.
Well,
but
I
shared that. Sorry?
You're on rainwater? You're on
yes. Yeah, and I share that because when I'm away for work or whatever reason, I'll like to bathe and have a bath before going to sleep. But invariably, it's a combination of being in the artificially heated and air conditioned environment I'm in, but I'm really also aware of the water.
So a little trick you can do, and this is what I do, because when I'm in a hotel,
I wake up feeling hungover.
Yeah,
I don't feel enlivened.
Well, you go to hotels though, you have a bath, and the water's so chlorinated that you're breathing it. So what you do is, when you go to somewhere where you don't have a filter, you just fill the bath up, a few degrees hotter than you can tolerate, and put the fan on and wait half an hour.
Right. Okay.
And in that half an hour with the fan on, that chlorine will dissipate. And then you can go back when the bath's cooled down a little, and then have a chlorine-free bath, even in a hotel room or a situation where there's chlorine in the water.
That's great. That's wonderful to know. And for everybody listening in, whether it be in a hotel room or even in your home, if you have chlorinated water and don't have a system in place to address that, then that's
getting chlorine out is just a no-brainer. But then you want to filter, you want to structure the water, and a grander system does that. And there's so many ways to do that with magnets. You can do it with vortex devices. You can do that with cavitation devices. And so the science of structured water is still emerging. There are 74 scientific anomalies about water that we just don't understand, that are well documented, that we just don't understand. And we are water. 99% of our molecules in our body are water molecules. So we know 2/3 water by mass or by volume, but water, makes up 99% of our molecules, because all our other molecules, collagen and proteins and nucleic acids are massive, and they're all in this liquid environment. So, the reason why we're not a puddle on the floor, if we're 99% water, is that we're structured water. Literally, water is the structure of our body is water. And we can structure the water that we drink through a whole lot of different processes, as I say, through vortex devices or magnets. And then we can balance the water in terms of its pH and its mineral balance, because you don't want to be drinking water without minerals. You need natural magnesium, calcium, etc. in water. And then we can add consciousness to our water by just thinking about it, by blessing our water, by consciously saying, water, I love you, I thank you, I bless you, by having some sort of token where our water comes from. So water's not just this amorphous thing that appears as an industrial product from our taps in our life, and literally just runs down the sink. We can actually consciously know where it comes from and where it's going to. And the more we can raise our consciousness and align our consciousness with our water, the more that water will imbue our consciousness.
And in many countries, in our wonderful globe, water is acknowledged as a living entity, and water is revered it has the qualities of deities, of the gods themselves. I think of, all over the world.
And one of the really powerful things you can do if you're really unsettled, and there's a lot of reasons to be unsettled right now in the world, is just to spend time in or near water.
Yes.
Because water has a consciousness. It's holding the whole global consciousness. So spending time in or near water, and we've known that inherently. To spend time in or near water it feels good for us. I mean, they say that the two most expensive words in the English language is ocean view. Because those two words to any real estate, and suddenly it's become so much more valuable. And that's because inherently we want to spend time in and near water.
Yeah. Because it just feels wonderful.
Yeah, it does.
It feels natural. It feels we're in love.
So I've created these water systems, and I'm still creating them. So I've actually created these top end water filters for the whole house, also for under the sink and for just the drinking tap. And so I'm actually marketing them at the moment, but I'm actually now working and developing what I call beautiful water. And beautiful water is water that's not just filtered, it's filtered, structured, balanced in terms of pH and minerals, it's blessed, and it's given away for free. Because once water is a commodity, it's no longer beautiful. And I'm sort of starting to launch it now. It's been hard during the lockdown, but my intention is, and I've worked with a few businesses already, and one business here, the Peninsula Hot Springs, which is owned by some friends of mine, it's the largest hot spring in Australia, commercial hot spring in Australia. They've now put water, these filters on all their drinking fountains, and they've stopped selling plastic water bottles.
Oh, wonderful.
And they were selling thousands of plastic water bottles a week. So now they can say, hey, come and fill up your drinking bottle, drink as much as you want, in our drinking fountains, we've got beautiful water for free. And I want to do that through a whole lot of conscious businesses. So whether it's restaurants or yoga centers or gyms or spas, to put in these beautiful water systems to be able to give people that for free. So, and there's an app called Refill My Bottle where they can register. So anyone, if you're in where can I fill up my water bottle? And if that happens, then the businesses next door will stop selling plastic water bottles, because they're going to be giving away a high quality product for free.
That's clever.
And then they can then promote the filters. So they can then replace that income they were making from the plastic water bottles by selling the filters and promoting that. And get a affiliate commission from selling the filters rather than selling plastic water bottles. And when you look at plastic water bottles, there are 500 billion plastic water bottles made every year. That's 1 million a minute. And most of that plastic ends up in the oceans and landfill, and that plastic then degrades. And they estimate that just everybody in the Western world, we eat about a credit card worth of plastic a week. by the amount of plastic that's in our food chain.
Yeah. And it's not necessary. It's simply not necessary.
It's also super expensive. I mean, a litre of water in a plastic water bottle costs about $3.
Mm.
Whereas if you use, like, my filters aren't the cheapest even, but they're, I think they're the best. But a litre of water coming out of one of my filters costs about half of 1 cent.
Well, it's where we place value too. So, and the more educated we become, the more awake and aware that we become, then we have a different value of things. And so suddenly what may seem an expensive outlay initially no longer seems that. It becomes a no-brainer that this is an investment in individual and planetary wellness.
Well, and yeah, your own personal consciousness, because but it's also just a good investment. As I say, it's a litre of point of use filtration water, when you filter it at the point of use, costs about less than 1 cent.
Mm.
Whereas if you're buying plastic water bottles, it's a couple of dollars per litre, and you've got the whole logistic nightmare and the plastic nightmare, and it just doesn't make sense. I mean, it's super profitable for the companies that sell bottled water, and that they're now buying up water rights and making water a commodity around the world. I mean, that's serious commercial infrastructure now trying to dominate the world's water supplies. And we certainly can't rely on the tap water that's being delivered to our homes to be healthy, because the water infrastructure that the supply pipes and everything, often more than 100 years old, but they're full of lead solder and galvanized steel and rust and sediment and biofilm. And then the chlorine that's added to the water leaches the lead out of the solder, and it pits the copper and causes leaks. So, and chlorine doesn't kill everything. Chlorine doesn't kill Cryptosporidium and Giardia. It won't kill most viruses. But what it does do, it changes the microflora of that water towards being more antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So it changes the gene profile of the bacteria, and to more likely to have pathogens. So it sort of does the opposite of what you want. And, it sounds obvious, but, drinking less poison is good for you. And
that's a good starting point, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you don't use a filter, you are a filter. You become the filter. So it's just a no-brainer that you want to have. And the best water source of all is to have natural spring water. So not even have a filter. And for more than 10 years, I used to go to Mount Donabuang in Melbourne. It was about an hour and 20 minutes from my home. Every 4 to 6 weeks, I'd drive up there and fill up big bottles and drink the spring water. And there's a great website, findaspring.com, and it's a global resource for finding your closest natural water spring.
And what a great adventure to embark upon.
And my kids used to love it because, in the summer it'll be hot, and winter there'd be snow up there, and just and going to the water. And very often I'd meet friends and colleagues, just waiting around the well, to fill up our water bottles.
It's beautiful. It's a great tradition. And I find when drinking water from a spring like that, there's not a heaviness. The body does not feel heavy. Feels satisfied, but not heavy and full.
Yeah, well, if you treat water as literally as what it is, it's a liquid crystal. So if you treat it as that liquid crystal, which then becomes our body, you change your relationship to water, you change your relationship to life. It's a really powerful thing, and it's such a simple thing to change. And you don't have to, there are ways around, as I say, you can just let water stand and let the chlorine evaporate off if you're going to bathe. And so you don't have to get an expensive filter, although that's, a multi-stage filter is the best approach for your whole house if you can. But just raising the consciousness that you have around your water, just that simply can shift things for you. And I'm a big fan of permaculture, and Bill Mollison says, when you get the basic things right, everything else goes right by itself. And water is one of the most basic things. So when you get that right, other things tend, just like when I was talking about when you clean up your mitochondria and your cells become starting to metabolize more efficiently, all these other things seem to go right by themselves, because suddenly you've got more energy, you're thinking clearer, and you get to live more fully. And then all these little things that were a problem sort of melt away, and they're no longer a problem.
Absolutely. And this is, this is awakening to wellness, isn't it? This is really becoming whole again. Dr. Marc, thank you for all you do. I mean, your energy is boundless. It's just it's fantastic, and thank you so much for being in conversation today and just sharing so richly.
Oh,
Um,
it's my
in,
pleasure. I mean, I could
knowledge.
be talking all day. There's so many great
I
things.
know, I know, I know. I want it to keep going, but
People
yeah,
can have a look. I've got a extremewellness.co is my website, and people can follow. There's information there about. I've got a blog there and stuff about my filters and my retreats. I'm waiting for travel to come back to New Zealand to run a retreat at Maria Hot Springs, and there we do a thing that's just a water paradise. And there we do a thing I call adventure bathing, where we take people out either to the top of the high plains in the Southern Alps or to these river valleys where there's glacial runoff rivers. And we set up a hot tub, a steam room, and a heated hammock and a gourmet lunch with a fire. So you hike for a couple of hours through the New Zealand forest, which is just like Narnia. It's just
yes.
heaven. And then, you come to this freezing water source, but you've got a hot tub and a steam room there. So you don't mind going from the hot tub and then you jump in the freezing river. And when you're doing that in the middle of nature, it's just a transformative experience. It's just
Wow. Okay, that's one for the bucket list.
and then we pack it
Those
all up.
people right now are probably googling and looking you up.
Well, they look at Maria Hot Springs. We haven't announced the dates for the next retreat. We were supposed to have one 2 weeks ago, but there's no travel.
Everything's on hold.
So
Everything's on hold. But the thing
it'll
that
probably
we
be October.
right now is our relationship to water. If nothing else, bring some consciousness to your next sip of water.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even if it's just giving thanks to that water, no matter what it is, that even just that simple act can actually transform your relationship. Yeah.
Indeed. Dr. Marc, thank you so much.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Great blessings.
Thank you.